There is a moment in every life when you catch a glimpse of yourself in an unexpected mirror, perhaps in a shop window as you hurry past, or in the surface of still water, and, for just an instant, you don't recognize the person staring back. The face seems foreign, wearing an expression you don't remember putting on, carrying a weight you don't remember accepting. In that brief, disorienting flash, you touch something profound, the recognition that who you appear to be and who you truly are may be strangers living in the same skin. This is the first whisper of awakening, the initial crack in what Carl Jung called the persona, that elaborate costume we have sewn so carefully around ourselves that we have forgotten we are wearing it at all. The persona is not evil, it is necessary. Like clothing that protects us from the elements, it shields our tender inner life from a world that is often harsh, demanding, and unforgiving. But somewhere along the way, in the gradual accumulation of days and a slow surrender to expectations, we make a fatal error. We begin to believe that the costume is our skin. Watch a child before the world has taught them to perform. See how they move through space with an authenticity so complete it seems almost alien to adult eyes. They cry when they are sad, laugh when something delights them, rage when they feel injustice, love without calculation. They have not yet learned the elaborate dance of social acceptability, have not yet constructed the intricate prison of others' approval. They simply are, in all their messy, magnificent, unedited truth. But the world, in its well-meaning wisdom, begins to teach them otherwise. Don't cry so loudly, it whispers. Don't laugh so freely. Don't feel so deeply. Here, let me show you how to be acceptable, how to be safe, how to be loved. And so, layer by layer, like sediments settling at the bottom of a lake, the persona forms the professional mask, the family role, the social identity, each one necessary, each one carefully crafted to meet the world's expectations. The tragedy is not that we develop these masks. It is that we forget they are masks at all. The successful businessman loses sight of the dreaming child who once built castles in boxes. The dutiful daughter forgets the wild girl who danced alone in her room to music only she could hear. The responsible parent buries the lover who once wrote poetry to the moon. We become so accomplished at wearing our roles that we mistake them for our essence, so skilled at our performance that we forget we are performing at all. Jung understood this with profound clarity. He saw how the ego, that organizing principle of conscious life, becomes terrified of anything that threatens its carefully constructed identity. The ego is not the enemy, is simply frightened. Like a security guard protecting what it believes to be precious, it stands sentinel over our persona, ready to defend it against any threat of authenticity that might disrupt the familiar order. But here is the beautiful paradox that lies at the heart of all transformation. The very terror we feel at the thought of removing our masks is the surest sign that we are ready to begin. Fear is not the opposite of readiness. It is readiness wearing the face of resistance. When we feel that deep, existential panic at the thought of being truly seen, truly known, truly ourselves, that is not a warning to retreat. That is an invitation to proceed. The mask begins to feel suffocating precisely when the soul beneath it is growing too large to be contained. Like a snake that must shed its skin to survive, we reach a point where our persona becomes not protection, but prison. The very identity that once served us begins to strangle us. The role that once felt like home begins to feel like exile. The face we show the world begins to feel like a lie we can no longer tell with conviction. This is the beginning of what mystics have called the dark night of the soul. But it might be better understood as the dawn night of the soul, that liminal time when darkness and light exist simultaneously, when the familiar is dying and the new has not yet been born. It is uncomfortable, disorienting, frightening, but it is also sacred, necessary, and ultimately liberating. The persona does not surrender ease. It has been our companion for so long, our protection, our way of navigating a complex world. To consider its dissolution feels like contemplating death itself, which, in a sense, it is. It is the death of who we thought we were, who we believed. We had to be who we convinced ourselves was real. This symbolic death is not metaphorical. It is as real as any biological ending, complete with grief, terror, and the desperate bargaining of a self that would rather remain imprisoned than face the unknown territory of authenticity. Yet, in that terror lies the seed of liberation. For what we fear to lose was never truly ours to begin with. The mask, no matter how beautifully crafted, no matter how well it has served us, is not our face. The role, no matter how perfectly we have played it, is not our identity. The persona, no matter how completely we have inhabited it, is not our soul. And so we stand at the threshold, feeling the first crack in the shell that has both protected and confined us, knowing that to continue growing, we must allow it to break completely. This is where transformation begins, not in the comfort of certainty, but in the terror of authentic possibility, not in the safety of the known, but in the wild, untamed territory of who we really are, beneath all our careful constructions. The mask is beginning to slip, and for the first time in perhaps years or decades, we glimpse the face that waits beneath. It's unfamiliar, yet somehow deeply known, strange, yet mysteriously home. There is a ghost that walks the corridors of your heart, silent, persistent, carrying the weight of all the lives you have not lived. It moves through the chambers of your being like mist through an abandoned cathedral, whispering secrets your waking mind refuses to hear. This is the specter of possibility, the shadow self that Jung knew haunts every human soul, demanding recognition from behind the carefully constructed walls of who you think you were supposed to be. Listen closely, for in the spaces between your heartbeats, in the pause before sleep claims you, this phantom speaks. It tells of the artist who was sacrificed on the altar of security, the lover who was buried beneath the avalanche of reason, the adventurer who was suffocated by the pillow of practical concerns. These unlived lives do not simply disappear, accumulate like sediment in the depths of the psyche, creating a pressure that eventually demands release. You feel it, don't you? That strange ache that arrives without warning, usually in moments of supposed contentment. You are sitting in your carefully ordered life, surrounded by the fruits of your sensible choices. And suddenly there is this hollow sensation, as if something essential has been carved away from the core of your being. This is not dissatisfaction, it is deeper than that. It is the soul's rebellion against the betrayal of its own nature. The persona you wear like armor has become a prison. What began as protection against the harsh judgments of the world has hardened into a shell that no longer serves you. You have become so skilled at being who others expect you to be that you have forgotten the person you were before the world told you who you should become. The mask is fused with the skin, and now you cannot tell where the full self ends and the true self begins. But the unlived life is patient. It does not rage or demand immediate attention, it whispers, like water finding the smallest crack in stone. It seeps into your awareness through dreams that leave you melancholy upon waking, through sudden tears that spring from sources you cannot name, through moments when you catch yourself staring at strangers who seem to carry something you have lost. These are not random occurrences, but communications from the depths. Messages from the part of you that refuses to die quietly. Your body knows this betrayal intimately. It carries the grief in the tension of your shoulders, the resignation in the curve of your spine, the swallowed words in the tightness of your throat. Physical symptoms that have no clear medical cause are often the unlived life, speaking through flesh, demanding acknowledgement through the only language left to it. The migraine that strikes when you are about to make another practical choice. The insomnia that visits when you have successfully silenced another authentic impulse. These are not mere inconveniences, but sacred communications from the exiled parts of your soul. In the mythology of transformation, there is always a call that goes unanswered, a voice that speaks from the wilderness of the unconscious. The Greeks understood this as the cry of Dionysus, the god of wildness and authentic feeling, whose voice could drive one to madness if ignored too long. Jung saw it as the compensation principle at work, the psyche's endless attempt to balance the one-sidedness of conscious existence with the fullness of what lies beneath. You have become an expert at rationalization, haven't you? You have learned to explain away the quickening of your pulse when you see someone living boldly, the envy that rises when you witness authentic expression, the grief that touches you when you encounter art that moves your soul in ways your current life never does. I'm too old, you tell yourself. I have responsibilities. I can't just abandon everything. But the unlived life knows these for what they are, not reasons, but excuses. Not wisdom, but fear dressed in the clothing of maturity. The paradox is this: the very stability you have created to protect yourself has become the source of your deepest suffering. You have built a life so safe that it has become a kind of death, so predictable that it has drained the color from your days. You are alive but not living, breathing but not truly animated by the force that once moved through you with such natural ease. Yet even now, as you feel the weight of recognition settling upon you like a cloak, the unlived life stirs with hope. For acknowledgement is the first step toward liberation. And consciousness, however painful, is always the beginning of choice. The whisper grows stronger when it is finally heard, not because it seeks to destroy what you have built, but because it knows that what you have built cannot satisfy the deeper longings of the soul. This is the sacred restlessness, Jung wrote, of the divine discontent that signals not that something is wrong with you, but that something essential is trying to be born. The unlived life does not seek to make you abandon everything. It seeks to infuse everything with the authenticity you have been withholding. It wants to breathe through your work, love through your relationships, create through your daily existence. The fog of conformity that has surrounded you for so long is beginning to thin. In its clearing, you can glimpse the shape of who you might yet become, not by rejecting everything you are, but by remembering everything you have forgotten. The song trapped in your throat is beginning to vibrate, seeking its release into the world that has been waiting, perhaps unknowingly, to hear its unique melody. Listen. The whisper is becoming a voice. The voice is becoming a call. And the call, if you let it, will become the beginning of your return to yourself. In the depths of this sacred unraveling, you find yourself standing at the edge of everything you once called home. The familiar rooms of your identity, those carefully constructed chambers where you've stored your certainties, your well-rehearsed stories, your polished masks, begin to dissolve like salt in rain. This is the nigredo, the blackening, the holy decomposition that precedes all true transformation. The darkness that descends is not the darkness of evil, but the darkness of the womb fertile, necessary, pregnant, with possibility. It is the darkness Jung understood as the prima materia, the raw, undifferentiated substance from which all conscious life emerges. You have entered the laboratory of the soul, where the old lead of ego must be dissolved before it can be transmuted into the gold of authentic being. Here, in this void between selves, the familiar landmarks of your psychological landscape fade into shadow. The career that defined you, the relationships that anchored you, the beliefs that guided you all begin to feel like costumes worn by an actor who has suddenly forgotten their lines. The persona, that carefully crafted mask you wore to meet the world's expectations, starts to crack and peel away like old paint on a weathered wall. This is not collapse, this is consecration. The ancient alchemists knew that before any true transformation could occur, the original material must return to its primordial state. The solid must become liquid, the formed must become formless. The known must dissolve back into the unknown. You are being invited into this sacred dissolution, this holy undoing that clears the way for something unprecedented to emerge. In the silence of this inner emptying, you hear sounds you have never heard before, the whispers of parts of yourself that have been waiting in exile, the voices of unlived lives stirring in the depths of your unconscious. The shadow, that repository of all you have denied and rejected about yourself, begins to seep through the cracks in your dissolving defenses. Not as enemy, but as teacher. Not as destroyer, but as revealer of hidden wholeness. The ego, that faithful servant of survival and social acceptance, finds itself suddenly unemployed. Its usual strategies, controlling, achieving, performing, avoiding, proves useless in this liminal realm where nothing can be grasped or fixed or figured out. Like a lighthouse keeper whose beacon has gone dark, the ego stumbles through unfamiliar territory, learning humility in the face of forces far greater than its comprehension. This is the dark night of the familiar self, where every assumption about who you are undergoes rigorous examination in the crucible of lived experience. The stories you told about your childhood, your character, your destiny, they all begin to seem like fairy tales told by someone else. You realize you have been living inside a narrative constructed not by your deepest truth, but by the expectations and projections of others, by the fear of rejection, by the desperate need to belong somewhere, anywhere, even if it meant betraying your own soul. In this darkness, time moves differently. Minutes feel like hours, days blend into nights, and the linear progression of your former life gives way to the cyclical, mythic time of the unconscious. You are living inside an ancient story, now the story of death and rebirth, of descent and return, of the hero's journey into the underworld of the psyche. This is not merely personal struggle. This is participation in the eternal human drama of transformation. The familiar furniture of your inner world, your habits, preferences, automatic reactions, seem suddenly foreign, as if you have awakened in someone else's house. You reach for the comfort of old patterns and find them gone, dissolved in the acid of this deeper seeing. Where once there was solid ground, now there is only space, vast, open, terrifying, and somehow sacred. This is the phase Jung called enantiodromia, the running opposite, where everything turns into its shadow. Your strengths reveal their hidden weaknesses, your certainties expose their underlying doubts, your identity shows its empty center. But this reversal is not cruel. It is revelatory. It shows you the full spectrum of your being, the complete palette from which your authentic self will eventually be painted. In the midst of this dissolution, you may find yourself grieving, not just for what you are losing, but for what you never allowed yourself to be. The unlived lives, the unexpressed gifts, the roads not taken because they seemed too dangerous, too uncertain, too far from the approved script of success and security. This grief is holy water, blessing the compost of your former self, preparing the soil for what wishes to grow. The darkness deepens, and in its depths, you begin to sense something moving, not the frantic movement of escape or achievement, but the slow, patient movement of gestation. Something is being born in this blackness, something that could never emerge in the harsh light of your former certainties. Like seeds that required darkness to germinate, your true self is stirring in the rich soil of your unknowing. This is the necessary winter of the soul, where all growth happens underground, invisible, sustained by faith rather than evidence. You are learning to trust the intelligence of dissolution, to surrender to the wisdom of falling apart. In this trust, you discover a strange peace, not the peace of resolution, but the peace of complete presence to whatever is arising, even when what is arising is the complete absence of everything you thought you needed to survive. The familiar self dies slowly, ceremonially, like autumn leaves, releasing their hold on branches to return to earth. And in this dying, something inexplicable begins to live, something that has been waiting your entire life for this moment of total surrender. This complete clearing of the stage, this sacred emptiness that finally has room for the unprecedented to emerge. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the familiar path narrows to a razor's edge, and ahead stands a figure that makes the blood run cold with recognition. Not a stranger, but the most intimate enemy yourself, wearing the face you have spent a lifetime refusing to claim. This is the shadow, the guardian at the threshold, and it will not be bypassed, bargained with, or reasoned away. It stands there with the patience of stone and the fury of all your abandoned selves, holding in its dark hands the very keys to your becoming. You have traveled so far to reach this place, this liminal space where transformation waits like a lover behind a locked door. The persona you wore so carefully has begun to crack, its painted smile revealing the raw humanity beneath. The ego's grand designs have crumbled like ancient temples, leaving you naked before the mirror of your own depths. And now, at the very threshold of rebirth, you meet the one who knows your every secret, every buried shame, every disowned impulse that you banished to the wasteland of the unconscious. The shadow does not announce itself with fanfare. It emerges, slowly, like fog rolling in from forgotten valleys of the psyche, carrying with it the scent of all you have denied. Perhaps it wears the face of your rage, that volcanic fury you learned to swallow rather than express, now grown monstrous in the dark caves of repression. Perhaps it carries your greed, your lust, your envy, all the human hungers you were taught to call sin. Or maybe it shows you your power, that terrible creative force you learned to fear because others feared it in you, now twisted into something you barely recognize as your own. This meeting is not accidental. The psyche, in its infinite wisdom, orchestrates this confrontation with the precision of a master playwright. For you cannot step into the fullness of who you are meant to become, while parts of yourself remain locked in the prison of denial. The shadow is not your enemy, though it may seem so. It is the fierce guardian of your wholeness, the keeper of all the energy you have spent lifetimes trying to escape. It blocks your passage, not out of malice, but out of love, a love so deep and primal that it will not let you proceed until you are truly ready to embrace the totality of your being. In the mythology of the hero's journey, this I is the dark night of the soul, the descent into the underworld where the traveler must face the monsters of their own making. But these are not monsters to be slain. They are aspects of self to be recognized, claimed, and integrated. The shadow stands before you like Cerberus at the gates of Hades, three-headed and terrible, but its ferocity is born of protection, not destruction. It guards the treasure that can only be claimed by one who has the courage to look upon their own darkness without flinching. This is the paradox that the rational mind cannot grasp. To become whole, you must embrace your brokenness. To find your light, you must acknowledge your darkness. To step into your power, you must own your shame. The shadow knows this ancient truth, and it will not let you pass until you demonstrate that you understand it too. It tests you not with riddles but with mirrors, reflecting back every aspect of yourself that you have learned to judge, to hide, to deny. The confrontation may feel like a battle at first. The ego, terrified of dissolution, may try to fight, to project, to blame the darkness on others, rather than claim it as your own. You may feel the old familiar urge to turn away, to find another path, to postpone this reckoning for another lifetime. But the shadow is patient. It has waited for you through countless seasons of avoidance, countless attempts to sidestep this essential meeting. It knows that eventually, inevitably, you will come to understand that there is no other way forward. The alchemy of transformation requires all the elements, including lead. The hero's journey demands that you retrieve not just the golden fleece, but also acknowledge the dragon that guards it as part of your own nature. This is what Jung called the enantiodromio, the running toward the opposite, the recognition that every light casts a shadow, every virtue contains the seed of its corresponding vice. Every angel carries within it the memory of its fallen nature. As you stand before this guardian, something profound begins to shift. The fear does not disappear, but it transforms into something else, a recognition, perhaps even a strange gratitude. For you begin to see that the shadow has been your faithful companion all along, carrying all the parts of yourself that society, family, and your own frightened ego could not accept. It has held your wildness when the world demanded you be tame. It has preserved your anger when you were taught that nice people never rage. It has kept alive your deepest desires when you were told they were selfish or wrong. The shadow is the keeper of your unlived life, the guardian of all the roads not taken, all the words not spoken, all the dreams not pursued. It holds your capacity for darkness, yes, but also your capacity for a depth of feeling, authenticity, and creative force that polite society never taught you to claim. In its embrace lies not just your capacity for destruction, but also your potential for a kind of creation that can only come from someone who has faced their own depths without flinching. This meeting at the threshold is not about conquest, but about integration. Not about defeating the shadow, but about wedding it, like the mystical marriage of opposites that the alchemists spoke of. This confrontation asks you to find the place where your light and darkness can dance together, where your acceptable self and your rejected self can be reconciled into something larger, more complete, more utterly and authentically human. The guardian steps aside, not when you have proven your strength, but when you have demonstrated your willingness to be whole. It hands you the keys to the next phase of your journey, keys forged from the very darkness you once feared, now transformed into the instruments of your liberation. For you cannot be truly free until you have claimed all of yourself, cannot be truly powerful until you have embraced your capacity for powerlessness, cannot be truly good until you have acknowledged the ways in which you are also capable of harm. This is the gift the shadow offers at the threshold, not just passage to the next phase of becoming, but the recognition that you are vast enough to contain multitudes, complex enough to hold contradiction, strong enough to bear the full weight of your own humanity. The guardian of the threshold reveals itself to be not an obstacle, but a teacher, not an enemy, but the most honest friend you will ever have, the one who refuses to let you settle for anything less than the full, terrible, beautiful truth of who you are. There comes a moment in the deepest chamber of transformation when all our sophisticated resistance crumbles, and we are left with a choice so stark, so elemental, that it reduces the complexity of existence to its most primal truth: to hold on or to let go. This is not the gentle releasing of a balloon into summer sky, nor the casual discarding of something we've outgrown. This is surrender in its most alchemical sense, the conscious, deliberate placing of everything we believe ourselves to be into the crucible of transformation. Knowing that what emerges may bear no resemblance to what we were, the ancient alchemists understood something about the nature of purification that our modern minds have forgotten. They knew that to transform base metal into gold required more than heat. It required the precise application of fire that would burn away impurities without destroying the essential substance. Too little fire, and the metal remains unchanged, still carrying within it all the debris of its earthly origin. Too much fire, and everything burns to ash, leaving nothing to transform. But the right fire, applied with sacred intention and unwavering faith, reveals what was always there beneath the surface, the golden essence that was never truly hidden, only obscured. So it is with the human soul standing at the threshold of authentic becoming. The fire that calls to us is not the fire of destruction, though it may feel that way to the ego trembling at the edge of dissolution. It is the fire of distillation, the sacred flame that burns away everything false while leaving everything true, not only intact, but revealed in its pristine clarity. This is the fire that transforms without destroying, that purifies without annihilating, that reduces without diminishing. Yet to the untransformed consciousness, surrender feels like death itself. The ego, that masterful architect of identity, has spent decades constructing an elaborate palace of selfhood, complete with towers of achievement, walls of protection, and gardens of carefully cultivated relationships. To surrender feels like watching this palace burn, like standing witness to the destruction of everything we have worked so hard to build. The ego does not understand that what burns was never truly solid, that what dissolves was never truly permanent, that what dies was never truly alive. Surrender asks us to release our death grip on illusion. And what a grip it is. Watch how tightly we hold to our stories of who we are, our narratives of what happened to us, our beliefs about what we deserve or don't deserve. See how our fingers curve around these constructs like claws, white-knuckled with the desperate strength of someone hanging from a cliff. We hold so tightly because we believe that letting go means falling into an abyss. We cannot yet see that what we think is solid ground beneath our feet is itself the illusion, and that letting go means not falling but finally learning to fly. The alchemical fire begins its work the moment we stop fighting it. It is a curious paradox that the very act of resistance is what makes transformation painful. Fire burns flesh, but it does not burn fire. Water drowns lungs, but it does not drown. Water, the part of us that suffers in surrender, is the part that was never real to begin with, the constructed self, the borrowed identity, the accumulated debris of years spent trying to be who we thought we should be rather than who we actually are. In the depths of this sacred burning, we discover the profound difference between dissolution and distillation. Dissolution would be the complete disappearance of self, the reduction of consciousness to nothing. But distillation is the opposite, the concentrated revelation of essence. Like a perfume maker who distills thousands of rose petals into a few drops of attar, the alchemical fire of surrender reduces the vast complexity of our false identities into the concentrated truth of our authentic being. Everything borrowed begins to burn first. The opinions we adopted because they made us acceptable. The dreams we pursued because they looked impressive. The ways of being we learned because they kept us safe. All of this catches fire with surprising ease, as if it were made of paper and had been waiting all along for the match. We watch, amazed, as years of careful construction go up in flames, and feel not the devastation we expected, but a strange, inexplicable relief. The fire burns hotter, and now it reaches the things we thought were truly ours. Our professional identities begin to smolder, then blaze. The roles we played in relationships start to char at the edges. The image we held of ourselves, as good or bad, successful or failing, worthy or unworthy, all of it feeds the flames. This is where terror meets ecstasy, where the ego's death throes become the soul's birth cries. What remains when the fire has done? Its work is not less than what we wit, is infinitely more. It is the irreducible core of authentic being, the golden essence that was always there, but could never be seen through all the accumulated layers of pretense. It is who we were before we learned to be who we thought we should be. It is the self that exists beyond all definitions, beyond all categories, beyond all the careful boundaries we drew to separate ourselves from the infinite mystery of existence. This is the great secret the alchemists encode in their cryptic texts. Transformation is not about becoming something other than what we are. It is about becoming what we have always been beneath all our careful disguises. The fire does not create the gold, it simply reveals it. Surrender does not make us authentic. It simply burns away everything that was blocking authenticity from expressing itself. In this moment of ultimate release, we touch the profound truth that what we thought was our destruction is actually our completion. That what felt like ending is actually beginning. That what appeared to be loss is actually the finding of everything we never knew we had lost. You have arrived at the most sacred and terrifying threshold of human existence. The void between identities, that luminous darkness where the old self has died, but the new self has not yet been born. Here, in this pregnant emptiness, you discover what the mystics have always known, that emptiness is not absence, but pure potential, not death, but the womb of all becoming. The familiar landmarks of your identity have crumbled. The stories you told yourself about who you are, the roles that once defined the contours of your existence, the beliefs that served as your North Star have dissolved into the primordial waters of unknowing. You float here, suspended between breaths, between heartbeats, between the person you were and the person you were becoming. And the sensation is both liberation and terror. Your ego, that faithful guardian of continuity, thrashes in these formless waters like a drowning swimmer. It reaches desperately for something solid to grasp, a familiar thought pattern, an old coping mechanism, any fragment of the former self that might serve as a life raft in this ocean of uncertainty. But this is precisely what must not happen. The void demands complete surrender, complete trust in the intelligence of emptiness itself. This is the space Jung called the transcendent function, that mysterious process by which the psyche transforms itself when caught between opposing forces. You are no longer who you were, but you are not yet who you will become. In this liminal realm, the ordinary laws of identity cease to apply. Time moves differently here. Cause and effect become fluid. The rigid boundaries between self and not self begin to dissolve, revealing the interconnected web of existence that was always there, hidden beneath the illusion of separateness. Feel how your breath moves in this space, slower, deeper, as if your lungs are learning to extract nourishment from emptiness itself. Your heartbeat echoes in the vastness, not the frantic rhythm of anxiety, but the steady pulse of something ancient and wise awakening within you. This is the sound of your authentic self, stirring in the depths, not yet ready to emerge, but gathering strength in the darkness. The void is not empty in the way the mind imagines emptiness. It is pregnant with infinite possibility, alive with the creative potential that exists before any particular form takes shape. Here, in this primordial silence, all the symphonies that will ever be played exist as pure potential. All the words that will ever heal exist as unspoken truth. All the love that will ever be given exists as undifferentiated compassion. You may feel yourself dissolving, and this is appropriate. The boundaries that once seemed so solid, where you end and the world begins. What is yours and what belongs to others, what is possible and what is impossible. These artificial constructs are melting in the transformative heat of the void. Do not resist this dissolution. It is not destruction, but a return to the source. A remembering of what you were before the world convinced you that you were separate and small in the creation myths of every culture. There is always this moment, the darkness before the light, the silence before the word, the emptiness before the fullness. The void is not the opposite of creation. It is creation's most essential condition. Nothing new can be born without first returning to this state of pure potential, this fertile nothingness from which all forms emerge. Your mind, trained to fill every silence with noise, every emptiness with stuff, rebels against this profound stillness. It generates phantom problems to solve, imaginary scenarios to worry about, endless mental chatter designed to avoid the one thing that terrifies it most, the recognition that it is not who you really are. But in the void, even these mental constructions lose their power. They arise and dissolve like waves on an infinite ocean, leaving behind only the vast awareness that witnesses their coming and going. This is where you learn the deepest teaching of transformation, that you are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your history, not your roles, not your achievements or failures. You are the space in which all of these arise and pass away. You are the eternal witness, the unchanging awareness that remains constant through every change, the stillness that exists at the center of all movement. The void teaches patience in a way that nothing else can. Here, you cannot force anything to happen. You cannot think your way to the next stage of your development, or will yourself into a new identity. You can only be present to this emptiness, this not knowing, trusting that within this apparent nothingness lies everything you need for your continued becoming. In this pregnant pause between identities, you begin to sense something extraordinary, that who you are becoming is not separate from who you have always been. The authentic self that is stirring in these depths is not a stranger but your oldest friend, not an acquisition but a remembering, not a destination but a return to your original nature before the world taught you to be otherwise. The void is teaching you the ultimate paradox of transformation, that in losing everything you thought you were, you find everything you actually are. In becoming nobody, you discover that you are everybody. In embracing emptiness, you realize that you are fullness itself, temporarily pretending to be empty so that you can experience the joy of rediscovering your own infinite nature. Rest here in this sacred emptiness. Let it hold you like a cosmic womb. Feel the creative potential pulsing in the darkness around you. Something magnificent is being born in this space between breaths. This pause between heartbeats, this eternal moment between who you were and who you are becoming. The symphony of your authentic self is gathering its first notes in the silence. Soon, very soon, the first movement will begin. In the deep chambers of your being, something stirs that has been waiting in exile since you first learned to be careful, to be good, to be acceptable to the world that demanded your wildness in exchange for belonging. Like Persephone returning from the underworld, carrying both the darkness of her descent and the promise of spring. Your authentic self emerges from the unconscious depths where it has been held in protective custody, preserved against the day when you would be strong enough to reclaim it. This is not the wounded inner child of popular psychology, but something far more potent, the eternal child, the pure eternus, the part of you that never learned to compromise its essence for social comfort. It carries the fresh eyes of the beginner, the untrained heart that still believes in magic, the spontaneous creativity that flows like water before it learns the shape of acceptable containers. This returning self brings with it the forgotten language of your soul, words you spoke fluently before you learned the safer dialect of conformity. You feel its approach first as a trembling in the foundations of your carefully constructed adult life. The responsibilities and obligations that once felt so solid, so unquestionable, begin to seem arbitrary, like rules to a game you never agreed to play. The career path that once promised security starts to feel like a cage. The relationships, built on mutual convenience rather than authentic connection, reveal their hollow centers. Not because these things are wrong, but because you are remembering what it feels like to be right, to be aligned with the deepest truth of your nature. The exile's return is not gentle. It comes with the force of a dam breaking, releasing decades of suppressed vitality, creativity, and authentic desire. You find yourself laughing at inappropriate moments, crying at commercials, feeling moved by colors and textures, and the way light falls across a wall. The sophisticated adult who learned to modulate every response, to measure every word, to present only the acceptable face to the world, suddenly finds itself hosting a guest who has no interest in such careful choreography. This returning self remembers what you loved before you learned what you were supposed to love. It remembers the hours you spent talking to trees, the elaborate fantasy worlds you created in your imagination, the wild joy you felt dancing when no one was watching. It remembers the questions you asked before you learned that some questions made adults uncomfortable, questions about death and God, and why grown-ups seemed so sad even when they were smiling. The gifts this exiled self brings are not tame offerings, carefully wrapped and socially acceptable. They are wild gifts, dangerous gifts, the kind that upset the established order of your life. Intuition that sees through the polite lies everyone agrees to pretend are truth. Creativity that refuses to be channeled into productive outputs and insists on playing for its own sake. A capacity for wonder that finds the extraordinary hiding in the most ordinary moments, making it impossible to sleepwalk through your days. You begin to remember the feeling of aliveness that coursed through your child body, the electric sense of being fully present in each moment. Before you learned to live in the future tense of anxiety or the past tense of regret, you inhabited the eternal now with the ease of a fish in water. That capacity returns like muscle memory, Awakening a vitality you thought you had outgrown but realize you had only buried. The integration of this exiled self is not without its challenges. The adult world, with its schedules and deadlines and expectations, does not always make room for spontaneity. Your colleagues may be disturbed by your sudden authenticity, your family confused by your newfound boundaries, your friends uncertain about this person who seems both familiar and utterly changed. The persona that served you so faithfully in the world of compromise begins to feel like an ill-fitting costume. Yet this is exactly the tension that Jung called the transcendent function, the creative conflict between who you have become and who you have always been. From this friction, something new can emerge, not the naive child lost in fantasy, nor the hardened adult cut off from wonder, but a new synthesis that carries the wisdom of experience and the vitality of innocence. You discover that reclaiming your exiled self does not mean abandoning responsibility, but rather bringing consciousness to your choices. The difference between obligation and devotion becomes clear. Where once you acted from should and must, you begin to act from choose and love. The work you do in the world transforms from mere survival strategy to authentic expression. Your relationships deepen as you show up, not with the polished persona of social acceptability, but with the raw honesty of someone who has remembered how to be real. The returning self brings with it a quality the Jungians call participation mystique, the ability to feel your deep connection to all life. The boundaries between self and world, which had become so rigid in the name of adult sophistication, begin to breathe again. You remember what it feels like to be part of the web of existence, rather than isolated from it. To sense the aliveness in everything, rather than seeing the world as dead matter to be manipulated and consumed. This is the beginning of individuation. In its truest sense, not the development of a stronger ego, but the emergence of the self, that deeper organizing principle that includes and transcends the ego. The exiled child self, once returned and integrated, becomes the guardian of your authenticity. The part of you that will never again consent to betraying your essential nature for the false security of others' approval in dreams. This returning self often appears as a luminous child, radiating in otherworldly wisdom, or as an animal wild, free, undeniably alive. These images are not mere symbols, but actual energies, actual aspects of your being that are awakening from their long sleep in the unconscious. Their return marks not an ending, but a true beginning, the commencement of a life lived not from the surface strategies of survival, but from the deep springs of authentic being, deep within the sacred chamber of the psyche, where the alchemists once dreamed of turning lead into gold. A wedding is taking place, not the wedding of two separate beings, but the mystical marriage of the divided self, the union of all you have loved with all you have feared, all you have claimed with all you have rejected, all you have been with, all you have refused to become. This is the Mysterium Conjunctionis, the great conjunction that the ancient wisdom keepers knew to be the secret of transformation itself. You stand now as both bride and groom, witness and celebrant, at the altar where your own contradictions come to be wed. The light in you, the shining aspect you have cultivated unpraised, extends its radiant hand toward the shadow you have spent lifetimes avoiding. They meet not as conqueror and conquered, but as lovers who have been separated by a cosmic misunderstanding, now ready to reclaim their essential unity. This marriage is not a compromise, but a completion, not a dilution of either essence, but an amplification of both. Watch as your strength kneels before your vulnerability, recognizing in that tender, trembling part of yourself, not weakness, but the very source of its power. For what is true strength but the courage to remain open in a world that teaches us to armor ourselves against feeling? Your vulnerability, no longer hidden in shame, reveals itself as the gateway through which love enters, the crack in the facade through which authentic connection becomes possible. In their union, you discover a new kind of power, not the brittle strength of the defended ego, but the flexible resilience of the truly alive. Here too, mind and heart approach the altar of integration. The intellect, with all its sharp analysis and careful categorization, meets the heart with its knowing that transcends logic, its wisdom that speaks in symbols and feelings rather than facts. They have been at war so long, these two aspects of your being, the mind dismissing the heart as foolish and impractical, the heart rejecting the mind as cold and disconnected. But in this sacred marriage, they discover they are not opposites, but partners, each incomplete without the other. The mind learns to trust the heart's deeper knowing, while the heart embraces the mind's capacity to give form to its wordless truths. This is the ancient dance of masculine and feminine within you, regardless of the body you inhabit. The solar consciousness that seeks to illuminate, categorize, and achieve meets the lunar consciousness that receives, gestates, and transforms in the darkness. Yang fire dances with yin water, each tempering and completing the other. In their union, you discover that you need not choose between being and doing, between receptivity and action, between the fierce warrior and the compassionate nurturer. You are large enough, complex enough, divine enough to be both. The alchemists called this the chemical wedding, the moment when the opposing elements within the soul cease their warfare and discover their fundamental unity. Solve et coagulate, solve and coagulate. The ancient formula that speaks to the necessity of breaking down the false barriers between aspects of self before they can be reconstituted into something greater. You have dissolved in the earlier stages of this journey, felt yourself liquefy under the heat of transformation. Now comes the coagulation, the crystallization of a new form of being that can hold all your contradictions without shattering. This marriage is not a one-time ceremony, but an ongoing sacrament, a daily recommitment to wholeness in the face of a world that constantly asks you to fragment yourself. Each moment offers the choice to honor this union or to fall back into the old patterns of division, rejecting parts of yourself to maintain the illusion of simplicity. Choosing sides in the internal wars rather than recognizing the wisdom in both perspectives. In this mystical union, you begin to understand what the mystics meant when they spoke of holding the tension of opposites without resolving them into false unities. This is the birth of what Jung called the transcendent function, the capacity to stand at the center of paradox without being torn apart by it. You learn to be simultaneously strong and tender, wise and innocent, individual and connected, human and divine, not as a compromise that weakens each quality, but as a dynamic tension that energizes and completes them. The child born of this marriage is not the ego with its narrow definitions and desperate needs, nor is it the shadow with its rejected energies and repressed desires. It is the self, that larger, deeper, more complete identity that encompasses and transcends both. This self can afford to be gentle because it knows its own strength. It can embrace uncertainty because it trusts its own wisdom. It can love deeply because it has married its own darkness and no longer fears being consumed by another's. This wedding of opposites creates a new kind of consciousness, one that can hold the full spectrum of human experience without needing to judge, fix, or reject any part of it. You become like the master chef who knows that the perfect dish requires not just sweet ingredients, but bitter ones, to each flavor distinct, yet contributing to a harmony that transcends any single taste. Your life becomes a symphony rather than a single note, complex and rich and full of surprising harmonies. The Mysterium Conjunctionis reveals that wholeness was never about perfection, about eliminating the difficult parts of yourself or transcending your humanity. Wholeness is about integration, about finding the place where all aspects of your being can coexist in dynamic, creative tension. It is about becoming a living paradox, a walking contradiction who has learned to dance with uncertainty and make art from ambiguity. As this sacred marriage is consecrated within you, you discover that the external world begins to shift as well. The battles you once fought with others, the projections of your own internal conflicts, begin to dissolve. You can meet another person's anger without having to become defensive, because you have married your own capacity for rage. You can witness another's pain without having to fix it, because you have learned to sit with your own suffering without running away. This is the great work, the opus magnus, that the alchemists sought not, the literal transformation of base metals into gold, but the psychological transformation of the divided self into the integrated whole. In this mystical marriage, you become both the alchemist and the gold, both the seeker and the treasure, both the question and the answer. The wedding feast that follows is the celebration of your own completeness, the recognition that you were never broken, only temporarily divided against yourself. There is a moment in every phoenix story that the ancient myths rarely describe in detail: the instant of arising, when something that was utterly consumed by fire suddenly stirs in the ashes and begins to move. Not the slow resurrection we might expect, not the gradual reconstitution of what was lost, but a sudden, inexplicable stirring of life, where moments before there was only the gray silence of complete dissolution. This is perhaps the most mysterious moment in all of existence, the birth of the new from the total death of the old. You have been in the fire. You have felt everything you believed yourself to be reduced to ash. The persona lies in ruins, the old identity scattered like dust in the wind. The carefully constructed life you spent decades building has been consumed so completely that not even memory seems adequate to recall its shape. You have experienced what the mystics call the ultimate poverty, the stripping away of everything, even the self that was doing the stripping. You have known the profound emptiness that comes when all definitions cease, when all categories collapse, when even the observer and the observed merge into undifferentiated stillness. And then, in the midst of this absolute zero, something impossible begins to happen. A stirring, a warmth, a movement so subtle it might be mistaken for imagination, except that imagination itself was consumed in the fire. What moves in the ashes is not thought, not memory, not will. It is something far more fundamental. It is the irreducible essence of being itself, the spark that exists before consciousness learns to recognize itself, the life that animates all form but belongs to none. This is not resurrection, as we commonly understand it. This is not the return of what was lost, the restoration of what was destroyed. The phoenix that rises is not the same bird that entered the flames. It is something entirely unprecedented, bearing only the faintest echo of what came before. The new self that emerges from the ashes of the false self carries within it no trace of the old identity, no residue of the previous personality, no continuity with the story that ended in fire. Yet paradoxically, This unprecedented being feels more familiar than anything you have ever known. It is as if you are meeting yourself for the first time, while simultaneously recognizing someone you have known forever. This is the great mystery Jung pointed toward when he spoke of individuation, not the development of personality, but the revelation of what was always already whole, already complete, already perfect, beneath all the layers of conditioning that obscured it. The Phoenix moment comes with a quality of knowing that transcends understanding. You do not think your way into this new existence. You simply find yourself existing in an entirely different way. Where once there was effort, now there is flow. Where once there was resistance, now there is acceptance. Where once there was the constant labor of maintaining an identity, now there is the effortless expression of authentic being. This new self carries within it the wisdom of dissolution. Having passed through complete annihilation, it knows with cellular certainty that nothing essential can ever be lost. It has learned the secret that death is not the opposite of life, but its deepest expression, not the enemy of existence, but its most intimate teacher. The Phoenix self understands something that the mind cannot grasp, that what can be destroyed was never real to begin with, and what is real cannot be destroyed, no matter how fierce the fire. The strength that emerges from this transformation is unlike any strength you have known before. It is not the brittle strength of will, the desperate strength of survival, or the compensatory strength of overcoming. It is the strength of pure being, unshakable, because it has nothing to defend, invulnerable, because it has nothing to protect, indestructible, because it is made of the same substance as the indestructible itself. This Phoenix self moves through the world with a freedom that seems almost supernatural to those still trapped in the prison of identity. It is not bound by the old stories, not limited by the old beliefs, not constrained by the old fears. It acts from a place of such authentic spontaneity that every gesture becomes a work of art. Every word becomes a teaching, every breath becomes a prayer. Yet this is not transcendence in the sense of escape from the human condition. The Phoenix does not fly away from the earth, brings the fire down into matter, the wisdom down into form, the eternal down into time. The transformed self is not less human, but more human, not detached from life, but more intimately connected to its source. It carries within its being the profound integration of all opposites, mortal and immortal, finite and infinite, personal and universal. The Phoenix moment marks the end of becoming and the beginning of being. No longer is there a sense of working toward some future state of wholeness, some distant goal of self-improvement. The new self exists in a state of completion that includes incompletion, a wholeness that embraces brokenness, a perfection that contains all imperfection. It has stopped trying to become something and has started simply being what it is. From this place of authentic being, life unfolds with a synchronicity that seems magical, but is actually natural. The transformed self attracts experiences, relationships, and opportunities that match its essential nature, not through effort or intention, but through the simple magnetism of authenticity. The universe responds to genuineness with a precision that would seem impossible if we had not witnessed it ourselves. This is the Phoenix moment, not a culmination but a commencement, not an ending but an eternal beginning. The new self that rises from the ashes carries within it the inexhaustible capacity for continuous rebirth. Knowing that every moment offers the possibility of dying to what is false and being born into what is true, you have become something new, a being who exists simultaneously in multiple dimensions of reality, no longer fully at home in any single world, yet intimately connected to all of them. This is the paradox of awakening. You have gained everything and lost your place of belonging. You walk now between worlds, carrying within your transformed consciousness the sacred responsibility of the bridge builder, the translator, the hermit, who has seen the face of truth and must learn to live with that vision in a world that prefers its comfortable illusions. The journey inward has changed you in ways that cannot be undone. You cannot unsee what you have seen, unknow what you have learned, unfeel what you have felt in the depths of your own becoming. The veil between the conscious and unconscious realms has become gossamer thin for you, allowing you to perceive the symbolic undercurrents that flow beneath the surface of ordinary experience. Where others see only mundane interactions, you witness archetypal dramas playing out. Where others experience only random events, you recognize the mysterious patterns of synchronicity weaving meaning through the apparent chaos of existence. This is both gift and burden. This enhanced perception. You have become like a person who can see color walking among those who know only shades of gray. The world appears to you now in its full psychological richness. Every conversation layered with unconscious projections. Every relationship dancing with shadow and light. Every choice revealing the deeper movements of the soul seeking its own completion. Yet, when you attempt to share these insights, you often find yourself speaking a language that others cannot understand, pointing to realities they cannot perceive. The hermit archetype has claimed you, not by removing you from the world, but by transforming your relationship to it. You move through the familiar landscape of human society like an anthropologist, observing a culture both foreign and intimately known. You participate in the collective dance while simultaneously witnessing it from a perspective that exists outside of time and conventional identity. This double consciousness, being in the world, but not of it, becomes your new way of being. People sense something different about you, though they may not be able to articulate what they perceive. There is a quality of presence you carry now, a depth of awareness that makes others feel both seen and slightly uncomfortable. Some are drawn to you like moths to flame, sensing in your being a possibility they can barely imagine for themselves. Others unconsciously avoid you, intuiting that your very existence challenges the foundations of that carefully constructed reality. You have become a living paradox, embodying the tension between transcendence and immanence, between the absolute and the relative, between the eternal and the temporal. In your transformed consciousness, these apparent opposites reveal themselves as complementary aspects of a greater wholeness. You understand now what the mystics have always known, that heaven and earth are not separate realms but different frequencies of the same infinite reality. This understanding brings with it a profound loneliness, the kind that cannot be assuaged by human companionship alone. You walk now in the company of your own deepest nature, befriended by the vastness within you. Yet this intimacy with the infinite can feel isolating in a world that mistakes connection for consciousness and confuses social belonging with spiritual communion. You have touched something so real that much of what passes for reality in the conventional world feels like a shared hallucination. Yet this very isolation becomes the source of your greatest service. Having learned to walk between worlds, you become a translator of the soul's language, capable of speaking the truths of the depths in words that those still climbing toward consciousness can understand. You develop the hermit's most essential skill, the ability to shine the light of your own awakening in a way that illuminates the path for others. Without blinding them with its intensity, your presence becomes medicine for a world suffering from the illness of disconnection. Without needing to preach or teach, you embody the possibility of integration. the living proof that it is possible to be both fully human and divinely conscious. People in your presence begin to remember parts of themselves they had forgotten, to feel stirrings of their own unlived potential, to sense the deeper currents that move beneath the surface of their ordinary awareness. You learn to navigate the delicate art of engagement, how much truth to reveal and when, how to honor both your own integrity and others' capacity for understanding, how to be authentic without being overwhelming. You become skilled at reading the readiness in people's eyes, sensing when someone is prepared for a deeper conversation and when they need to remain safely within the boundaries of conventional discourse. The world needs you now in ways it may not consciously recognize. In an age of increasing disconnection from the sacred, from the depths, from the soul's own knowing, you serve as a reminder of what lies always within reach, yet perpetually overlooked. You are a living bridge between the world of appearances and the world of essence, between the marketplace and the monastery, between the noise of the surface and the wisdom of the depths. This is your calling now, not to escape the world, but to transform it through your very presence within it. You walk between worlds, not as an exile, but as an ambassador, carrying news from the depths to those still struggling in the shallows, offering hope to those who have forgotten that there are other ways of being, other possibilities for human consciousness, other depths of reality waiting to be explored. You have become the hermit whose light guides others home to themselves, the bridge builder whose very existence makes possible new connections between the fragmented aspects of human experience. In learning to walk between worlds, you have become a world unto yourself, vast enough to contain all the contradictions, deep enough to hold all the mysteries, and radiant enough to illuminate the path for those who follow. Something fundamental shifts in the fabric of your existence when you begin living from the center of your authentic being. Like a planet that has found its true orbit around the sun, you discover that your life now operates according to a different gravitational law, one that draws toward you not what you think you should want, but what your soul has been secretly preparing to receive. This is not the shallow magnetism of positive thinking, or the desperate attraction techniques of those who still believe the universe is a vending machine, responding to the right combination of thoughts and desires. This is something far more mysterious and precise than natural consequence of aligning your outer expression with your inner truth. When the mask finally falls away and you dare to show the world who you actually are, the world responds by showing you what it actually has to offer. You notice it first in the quality of silence that surrounds you. Where once there was the anxious buzz of maintaining pretense, the constant inner negotiation between what you felt and what you thought you should feel, between what you wanted and what you believed you were allowed to want. Now there is a deep stillness, pregnant with possibility. In this authentic stillness, you become available to information that was always present but previously drowned out by the noise of your own self-deception. The people who enter your life begin to change, as if some invisible filter has shifted. Those who were drawn to your persona, the carefully constructed image you presented to the world, gradually drift away, replaced by souls who recognize something real in you and respond to it with their own realness. Conversations deepen beyond the ritualistic exchange of pleasantries and complaints. You find yourself in dialogues that feed your spirit rather than drain it, connected to others not through mutual neediness or social convenience, but through the recognition of shared authenticity. This is Jung's synchronicity in action, meaningful coincidences that seem to orchestrate themselves around your genuine being. The book you need falls from a shelf as you pass. The stranger who becomes a lifelong friend sits beside you on the train the very day You've decided to risk being vulnerable in conversation. The opportunity you never knew you wanted presence itself, just as you've developed the courage to say yes to the unknown. But these synchronicities are not random gifts from a benevolent universe, rewarding your spiritual progress. They are the natural result of a consciousness that has stopped interfering with its own deeper knowing. When you cease the exhausting work of being someone you're not, energy becomes available for perceiving what is actually there, the web of connection and meaning that was always present, but hidden behind the veil of your own pretense. Your work in the world transforms from labor into expression. Where once you performed tasks to earn approval or security, now you find yourself engaged in activities that emerge from your essential nature like fruit from a tree. The artificial distinction between who you are and what you do begins to dissolve. You are not wearing the mask of a professional. You are allowing your deepest gifts to find their natural outlet in the world. Money begins to flow, differently, not necessarily more abundantly in the conventional sense, but with a quality of rightness that makes abundance feel less urgent. You discover that when you stop chasing what you think you need and start expressing what you actually are, resources appear to support that expression in ways that bypass the usual logic of effort and reward. This is not magical thinking, but natural law. The universe is far more interested in supporting authentic being than inauthentic having. Relationships undergo a profound reorganization as your new gravitational field attracts those capable of meeting you at the depth from which you now live. The shallow connections built on mutual entertainment or convenience reveal their emptiness and naturally fade. In their place come relationships that feel like recognition souls, who see you not as the project you once believed yourself to be, but as the mystery you have always been. Love, when it comes now, arrives not as rescue from loneliness or validation of worth, but as celebration of wholeness. You attract partners who are drawn not to your neediness or your achievements, but to the quality of presence you embody when you are fully yourself. These relationships become laboratories for mutual becoming, rather than prisons of mutual dependency. Your body responds to this authenticity with increased vitality. The chronic tension that came from constantly monitoring and adjusting your presentation to the world begins to release. You walk differently, breathe differently, occupy space differently. Where once your physical presence was apologetic or aggressive, the body language of someone not quite at home in their own skin, now there is a natural authority, the quiet confidence of someone who belongs exactly where they are, because they are exactly who they are. Dreams become more vivid, more directive, as if your unconscious recognizes that you are finally ready to receive its deeper wisdom. The symbolic language of the psyche, which once seemed foreign and confusing, begins to feel like a native tongue you are remembering how to speak. Your inner guidance system, no longer jammed by the interference of false desires and borrowed goals, begins to function with startling clarity. This new gravity extends even to your relationship with difficulty and challenge. Problems still arise, but they arrive not as random punishments or obstacles to your happiness, but as precisely calibrated invitations to grow in the specific ways your soul requires. You begin to sense the intelligence behind your struggles. The way each challenge seems designed to develop exactly the capacity you most need to cultivate. Time itself seems to operate differently in the field of your authenticity. Where once you rushed frantically from moment to moment, driven by anxiety about the future or regret about the past, now you find yourself inhabiting a more spacious present, not because life has slowed down, but because you have stopped resisting its natural rhythm. You move with the current rather than against it. and discover that the current was always carrying you exactly where you needed to go. This is the law of authentic gravity, not a rule imposed from outside, but a recognition of how consciousness naturally organizes itself when it stops pretending to be something other than what it is. In this field of genuine being, life reveals its hidden generosity, its eagerness to support not your ego's agenda, but your soul's deepest purpose. There is a moment when you realize that you have been here before, not in this exact circumstance, not with these precise challenges, but in this sacred space of choosing between who you have been and who you are becoming. The path spirals, and you find yourself once again at the crossroads of transformation, facing yet another invitation to let go, to release, to surrender what you thought you knew about yourself into the great mystery of what you are meant to become. This is the eternal return, the sacred spiral that carries you not in circles, but in ascending loops of consciousness. Each revolution bringing you deeper into the truth of your being, while simultaneously lifting you toward a more expansive understanding of what it means to be fully alive. You thought the journey of letting go would be linear, straight path from full self to true self, from unconsciousness to awakening, from fragmentation to wholeness. But the psyche knows a deeper geometry, one that
knows the cyclical nature of all growth, all healing, all authentic becoming, like the seasons that return each year with familiar rhythms, yet subtle variations, like the spiral of the nautilus shell that repeats its pattern while expanding into ever greater chambers. Your journey of transformation curves back upon itself, inviting you to revisit old territories with new eyes, to face familiar shadows with deeper wisdom, to encounter the same essential questions from an elevated perspective. You discover that there is no final destination, no ultimate arrival, no moment when you can dust off your hands and declare the work of becoming complete. Each layer of false identity you peel away reveals another beneath it, like the endless veils of Isis, each one seeming to promise the ultimate revelation, each one offering its own gifts and its own necessary illusions. The mask of the achiever falls away, only to reveal the mask of the spiritual seeker. The identity of the victim dissolves, only to uncover the subtler disguise of the survivor. The role of the helper crumbles, exposing the hidden face of the one who needs to be needed. Each shedding feels final, each release seems complete, until the spiral turns again and you find yourself facing yet another invitation to go deeper. This is not failure, but grace. This is not spiritual immaturity, but the very essence of what it means to be an eternally evolving consciousness housed in a human form. The divine paradox reveals itself in all its mysterious glory. You must continually let go of who you were to discover who you have always been, not who you will become in some distant future, but who you are in the eternal now that exists beneath all your temporary identities, all your changing forms, all your evolving understanding. The spiral teaches you that transformation is not an event, but a way of being. It is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. It is not a mountain to be conquered, but a dance to be danced. Each step both familiar and fresh, each movement both a return and a departure. You learn to recognize the seasons of your own becoming, the spring of new insights, the summer of integration, the autumn of release, the winter of deep gestation before the cycle begins anew. In the earlier turns of the spiral, you may have fought against this cyclical nature, frustrated by what seemed like repetition, disappointed by what felt like going backwards. The ego, with its linear logic and its hunger for progress, rebels against the circular wisdom of the soul. It wants to graduate from the school of transformation, to earn its diploma in enlightenment, to move beyond the messy business of perpetual becoming into some imagined state of permanent arrival. But as the spiral carries you higher, you begin to appreciate its profound wisdom. You see that each return to familiar territory brings gifts that were impossible to receive during earlier passages. The same wound that once nearly destroyed you becomes, on a later revolution, a source of compassion for others who struggle with similar pain. The same pattern that once trapped you in unconscious repetition becomes, when met with greater awareness, a doorway to deeper freedom. The same challenge that once felt like punishment becomes, with expanded perspective, a perfectly designed invitation to grow into more of who you truly are. This eternal return reveals the deepest secret of the individuation process there is. No final self to be found, because the self is not a fixed entity but a dynamic process. Not a destination but a way of traveling. Not a thing to be grasped but a mystery to be lived. You are not becoming someone other than who you are. You are becoming more fully who you have always been beneath all the layers of conditioning, expectation, and learned identity. Each spiral of the journey strips away another layer of what you are not, like Michelangelo removing marble to reveal the statue that was always waiting within the stone. But unlike the sculptor's work, which ends when the final chip is removed, your revealing is endless because your essence is infinite. There is always more to discover, always deeper to go, always another dimension of your own mystery to explore. The eternal return teaches you to hold your transformations lightly, to celebrate your growth without clinging to it, to honor your progress without making it into a new identity to defend. You learn to be simultaneously the seeker and the sought, the question and the answer, the one who transforms and the unchanging awareness that witnesses all transformation. You discover that you can be fully committed to your becoming while remaining unattached to any particular form that becoming might take. In this endless spiral of release and renewal, you touch the divine paradox that mystics have always known. The more you let go, the more you become yourself. The more you surrender who you thought you were, the more you discover who you have always been. The more you release your grip on any fixed identity, the more you embody the fluid, eternal essence that is your true nature. This is the gift of the eternal return, not the promise of final arrival, but the recognition that the journey itself is the destination, that the spiral itself is home, that the continuous process of letting go and coming back to yourself is not a detour from life, but life itself, in its most sacred and authentic form. You are not trying to get somewhere else, you are already here, in the heart of the mystery, dancing the eternal dance of becoming.